Hi, everybody. My name's Todd Caponi, and I'm really excited to be hanging out with you this morning. This is such a cool event, but we're actually going to take a walk together. And so what I want you to do for a moment is I want you to imagine that you are walking home from an event or you're hanging out with some friends. You're so enthralled in the conversation that all of a sudden you look up and you look around and you realize that you're a little lost. You don't know where you are. Actually, you're in the dark woods. And off in the distance, you hear some crackling of some wood, some branches that are snapping. What happens? Well, the first thing that probably happens is your hands start to sweat a little bit. Your heart probably starts to race. You're subconsciously reacting to uncertainty. That uncertainty, it could be a bunny rabbit. It could be some wind that knocked over a branch, but your brain is wired to go to the worst case scenario, which is that thing is a bear and it is going to kill me. That's what happens to us when we face uncertainty. Now, let's double down on that and think you're all by yourself. So you're actually not with your friends and you're in the woods all alone. It becomes even more intense. So why do I start there? Why do I bring that up? Well, I think it's really important for us to understand that all of you that are participating in this right now, and myself and everybody I know, we're in a land of uncertainty right now. We went from the middle of February, we walked and it was the beginning of March, and all of a sudden we look around and we're in the woods and we don't know what that crackling is. So here we are, we're in the middle of May and we can't even predict what the beginning of June looks like. So we're all in this state of uncertainty. Now, that's the bad news, right? Our survival mechanism has jumped in. You know, it's really literally what's kept us alive as a species for the last billion years or however long we've been here, is that tendency to overreact. It's a survival mechanism that's really important, but we're all feeling that in the world right now. Maybe not to that level of intensity, but the good news in all this, if there's a silver lining, is in sales or anything that you do. For the people that are watching now, you're cross-functional, right? And we're all trying to predict what our customers are thinking about, what our buyers are thinking about, because if we can get into their minds and actually read them, wouldn't that be super helpful? Well, that is the silver lining here, is that in this environment of uncertainty, we can actually read the minds of our buyers, our prospects, our customers, because we're all in this together. I mean, the amazing thing to think about is 12 years ago was the last even recession we have, and it was a big one. It was obviously called the Great Recession, but your prospects and your customers, none of them were in the roles they are in now back then, right? So they're all in a world of uncertainty. And in many cases, some of those people weren't even in the workforce 12 years ago. So we're all falling back on that inherent survival mechanism that kicks in subconsciously when we're in a world of uncertainty, which is what we're in right now. So with that, what I'd like to do is to get you to think about yourself for a second, because we're going to take what you're feeling and what you're dealing with, and we're going to impart that on the world of anything that you're involved in, if it has to do with providing or driving influence, whether it's sales, whether you're in product and you're trying to push along a product enhancement, or you're an executive, you're trying to get funding. I want you to start with yourself. And we're going to start by answering the question, what do you do when you are faced with a personal downturn? When you're faced with a personal recession, or when you look out into the distance and you don't know what the future holds for you, what do you do? Okay, so I'm willing to guess that the first thing that you did come beginning early in March, or something that you would do when you're faced with a personal downturn, is you likely looked at your discretionary spending, which is the things that are kind of nice to have, right? Like if you had a personal trainer, obviously your gym closed, but in a normal recession, that might be one of the first things to go, right? The nice to have, the benefits, the discretionary stuff. My wife and I were looking at potentially replacing our couch because our cat liked to use it as a scratching post. We've decided that the couch is going to be fine for a little bit. So we're hanging in with that, right? New cars, anything that is discretionary, you probably got rid of. So that was number one. Number two thing that you likely did is you looked at your essentials and you did two things. And essentials meaning the things that you must have. Number one is that you look to reduce cost on those. So you looked across and said, hey, you know what? I like to buy the ultra organic, ultra pasteurized milk from Whole Foods. A gallon costs $6.50. But when things get kind of tight, you know, maybe I should just go over to Aldi and get myself a gallon of regular milk for $3.25. I can save 50% on that, right? We're probably driving an extra little mile to get a little bit of extra value on a tank of gas. We look to reduce costs on the things that we must have. And then the second piece that we do within this essentials category is we look to extend our runway as well. We want to make sure that we've got enough. It's part of the reason why we went and made a run on toilet paper, right? It's part of that survival mechanism. And it sounds crazy, but hey, we want to make sure that if they're going to run out, I want to be first to have it because I don't want to be out in the woods having to take care of business, right? Or the hand sanitizers or the face masks or anything that we need. That's number two. That's the second thing that we do. And then number three thing that we do is that we look at risk and we analyze, all right, what is worst case scenario in our environment and how do I protect against worst case scenario happening to me? That is the third thing that we do, right? Making sure that worst case is at the bottom and we're always above it. So reducing risk, like, you know, I joked that when I went out and got the mail today, I grabbed it with a pair of salad tongs because I don't know if the mailman has it, right? That's something that we do and we do all the time. So with that, let's just sum that up for a second. As human beings, what are we all doing when we're faced with a personal downturn? Number one is we look at our discretionary spending and we either eliminate or at least we dramatically reduce it. Number two is we look at our essentials and we not only reduce costs on those, but extend our runway, make sure we've got enough. And number three is we look at risk and we say, what is worst case scenario and how do we protect against it? Well, the interesting thing about it is that we're all human beings, whether or not we're in our personal lives or in our business lives. And because we've never been through this before, what do? We fall back on what our business or our personal sense tells us to do, which is to reduce discretionary spending, extend your runway on your essentials, reduce costs on those, and protect against worst case scenario. That's what we're all doing in our businesses now. So again, the good news, or if there's a silver lining, is that if we look at what is going on in this world, we can actually read the minds of our buyers. So with that, before we jump into the real sales empathy, that was the first piece, is I wanted you to just connect with, we're all thinking the same things, we're all dealing with the same things. Advice piece number one that I want you to think about though, is that if you in your organization are still working off of messaging that was created in February or in 2019 or in 2017, messaging created during an up market will fail in a down market. So the first thing that I would suggest you do is if you hit pause or take a note, take a look at your website and think to yourself, hey, is what we're selling, is what we're positioning, is this valid for the world that we're in right now and what we just talked about around the people that are visiting our website? We're all in the same boat. We're all thinking the same things. Does that messaging resonate with today's mindset? So I would suggest, for me personally, I looked at my website, I started over. I threw out my messaging before and said to myself, it is May of 2020. Who am I? What am I providing to customers and prospects today? And does my messaging match that? So that's tip number one. So from here, I want to dig into three core fundamentals around our brains and how we engage, how we decide, and how we prioritize. Okay, so over the last 10, 15 years, neuroscientists have pinpointed how our brains make decisions. There's been so much advancements into the world of behavioral science that have yet to make their way into the business community and specifically into the sales community. And so being the nerd that I am, I have tried to do my best to bring a lot of these learnings into the world of sales. But here's three in particular that I wanted to focus on today with you. Number one is this idea that decisions are subconsciously biased by the cost and the effort to act. We're going to dig into that, but that talks a lot about the journey that you take potential buyers on, that our brains are actually biased towards not the most complex and the biggest ROI, but actually biased by the effort it will take to act. We're looking to actually minimize our effort and get the highest reward for that. So that's number one. Number two is that we as human beings make feeling decisions supported by logic, not the other way around. So often we think that leading with ROI or leading with data is the way that we embolden into our customers or prospects this idea that, oh my gosh, this is so logical, I must do this. But that's not the way our brains work. We're actually wired to take shortcuts, and it's focused on feelings and emotion that drive our behavior. And number three is that transparency sells better than perfection. That when we present ourselves as perfect, or our products or services as perfect, we're actually driving the buyer to go do more homework. They're putting up a filter and saying, I don't believe this. And we're actually driving those buyers to do more homework to figure out how we're not perfect. And when we actually lead and embrace that and share our pros and our cons, we actually smooth the buying journey to where it becomes much shorter, sales cycles shrink, our win rates go up, and we're working on the opportunities to influence to sell that we should be working on versus the ones that we shouldn't. So if you're ready, I sure am. Let's dig into number one. All right, let's start with the first one. This idea that decisions are subconsciously biased by the cost and the effort to act. So I want to, at the beginning we took you to the forest. This time I want to take you to high school. So if you remember back to high school, when you had an English class, let's say I think it was maybe my sophomore year. In English class, the teacher assigned a book report to us. And they gave us a list of 50 books that we could choose from. And we had to just do a book report. And that meant reading the book and all of that. What did you do? Well, I know for me, what I was trying to do is go, all right, first of all, I'm going to look at these 50 books and figure out which one has a movie already made about it. That's number one. And then number two, is there cliff notes or something that I can use to really get a summary of the book? And I'll try to read it, of course. But I'm looking for the simplest path to the greatest reward, not just the greatest reward. I'm not going to go read Moby Dick, right? Unless there's cliff notes, which there is, and there's actually been a couple of movies based on it. So that might be the path. That's what we do. So when we think about that in a business sense, when we think about the projects that are in front of us, we're looking at which one is the simplest path to the highest reward. And that reminds me of a study that was done by I think it was the City College or University College London. This is so interesting to me, the neuroscience around this. But what they did is they brought a bunch of individuals into a lab, sat them in front of a computer screen, and on the screen had a number of bubbles or circles. And those circles were either going to the right or to the left. Now, what happened was when the bubbles would move to the right, all the individual had to do with their joystick is move it to the right. If the bubbles are moving to the left, they just had to move it to the left, of course. Well, here's what happened. What they did is they put a little bit of tension on the movement to the left, so that if you saw the bubbles moving to the left, it was actually a little harder, almost at a subconscious level, really at a subconscious level. It was a little harder to move the joystick to the left or the right. Well, after a short period of time, guess what each of these individuals' brains started to do? In unbelievable fashion, when the bubbles were moving to the left, they actually started moving the joystick to the right. Their brain was actually biasing their opinion of what they saw based on how easy it was, not the truth, right? So our brains are subconsciously biased against things that are hard. So when you think about your buying journey, are you making it hard for your customers and prospects? Are you adding extra steps? Or are you thinking about your buyer first when you're positioning your products and services? And one other example, and one thing that you can think about is the idea of choice. So we, oftentimes think that if we give our customers a lot of choice, that'll make it easier for them because they can do what they want and they're in control. Well, turns out that the opposite is true. Back in 2018, as Toys R Us was filing for bankruptcy and about to close their doors, they had a going out of business sale. We happened to be driving by, at the time my kids were 5 and 7, and we told the kids, hey, do you guys want to go to Toys R Us? Maybe we can see what we can get. And the kids got so excited. They were like, woo, you were so excited about going. Well, fast forward about half an hour. We're back in the car after the visit to the store, and both kids are sitting in their car seats. They both have a toy on their lap, and they're both crying. Why did that happen? Well, first of all, you walk into the store, and it's floor to ceiling, end-to-end options. So many options that for a child, but actually for any human being, it becomes overwhelming to the brain. It actually becomes exhausting. The more choices, the more exhausting it is to the human brain. So the kids are walking around going, I want that, I want that, I want that, I want that. And by the end, we could not get them to make a decision. We could not get them to choose. And again, having this fear of missing out was driving their exhaustion levels. So finally, my wife had to say, all right, there's 3 toys that I think you're gonna like. They're in the price range. Let's focus on those. Which one of those 3 do you want? And it drove the kids to finally make a decision, but it wasn't a decision they were happy with, right? They were still not satisfied, but at least they made a decision and got to one. And by the time they got into the car, they were thinking about all the toys that they left in the store. So when you think about your own interactions with your prospects and customers, I want you to think more like a Sherpa versus a dog chasing a car bumper down the road, not knowing where the car is going. Like imagine you're gonna go climb Mount Everest and you show up and the Sherpa says, hey, it's a big mountain. Which way do you want to go? Like you choose. You'd be like, we're all gonna die, right? Having too many choices is hard, but our role as leaders, as sales professionals, is to be the Sherpa, to guide them along the buying journey and to choose the path that is the easiest to get the customer or prospect to accomplish their goal. Your role is to be like a Sherpa, but it's also to be almost like a personal trainer as well. So if you combine Sherpa and personal trainer, what does a personal trainer do? Well, if you're looking to get healthy, you're looking to lose weight, you wouldn't walk into a personal trainer at the gym and tell the personal trainer, hey, listen, here's 50 bucks. I'm going to go do a couple of push-ups, and then I'm going to go spend 15 minutes on the treadmill, and then I'll be on my way. No, of course not. The personal trainer will say, hey, what are you trying to accomplish? And then their goal is to get you there as easy as possible, like the best path possible, but also to drive you to do more than you thought you could, right? They're not going to just leave you to the machines and say, hey, go try them. And 2 weeks later, you're at the chiropractor because you've screwed yourself up. They're there to help you avoid the pitfalls, to challenge you, and to help guide you through the journey. So that first one, again, is to think about the fact that we are subconsciously biased by the effort and cost to act. So one really easy, quick way to do that is to help look at your buying journey, figure out where there are unnecessary steps, but think about your role in this thing is to help make choices for your buyers. Help them on their path and make sure that they're choosing the right path. And in some cases, challenge them to do more than they thought they even could. Be the Sherpa / personal trainer, and you're going to see that your customers are seeing your opportunity for improvement as a priority over the other ones that are actually perceived as being harder. All right, so that was number 1. Okay, now we're on to number 2. And number 2 is an important one. We make feeling decisions supported by logic, not the other way around. Our brains actually make all of their decisions in the feeling and emotion center of our brain and only use logic to back it up. Now, why is this so important? Well, for all of you, we tend to want to talk about how great we are and our products and what we've developed. We tend to gravitate towards that direction. But what happens is logic is actually polarizing. Think about, have you ever seen a Facebook post, a political Facebook post that actually changed your mind about something around, even the way that we're dealing with this pandemic? Logic is polarizing, but it's feelings, it's emotion, it's stories that bring people together. And there's an opportunity for you to think differently about the way you present your products, your services, your offerings, your technology, or whatever you're doing to try to influence. And so one example that I wanted to start with is, I found this to be really, really interesting, but we think about cigarette warning labels as being very logical. Well, there was a neuroscientist named Martin Lindstrom, and what he did is he brought 2,080 smokers into a lab in California, showed them a cigarette warning label, and not these nice ones, but kind of the gross ones that you see in like Southeast Asia that have teeth falling out and charred lungs, and said, what do you think of when you see this? Now, again, we make feeling decisions, but we use logic to back it up. In each case, these people made very logical explanations about, yes, that cigarette warning label is actually making me think that I need to quit, and they always do. However, when those individuals were put into an fMRI machine, which is a functional magnetic resonance image machine that sees what's going on in the brain and then shown another cigarette warning label, in every case, the individual's craving center was going off. Their feeling center was kicking off a, gosh, you know what? I haven't had a smoke in a while. I should have one. Versus the opposite, with the cigarette warning label is meant to make them want to quit. Cigarette warning labels have the opposite impact. And so exactly does your logic. When you lead your presentations with logic, with ROI, with awards, with data, or even with what this is, which is a NASCAR slide, which is your logo slide, you're actually polarizing your audience. And what do I mean by that? Let's say you start a presentation with this slide. This is a slide that you're so proud of because it represents all of the great customers that you do business with. Well, what happens to the human brain? Well, imagine you've got 10 people in the room and 5 of them are for you when they walk in. They might look at this slide and go, you know what, if they're good enough for them, they're good enough for us. I'm going to actually use this in my justification for why we should work with them. But this same slide that those people are excited about, let's think about the 5 people that walk in and they're not quite on your side. They're either thinking about going with a competitor or sticking with the status quo. They might look at this same slide that you are so proud of and say, you know what, there's a lot of big companies in here. I think we're going to be a small fish in a big pond. Or they're going to look at it and say, gosh, you know what? I don't really see any companies in our vertical. These guys are all over the place. They're working with all kinds of companies. I want somebody who has expertise in ours. I don't want to work with a generalist. So they're using your same logical slides to tell the story that they want to tell, which was kicked off in the feeling and emotion center of their brain. That's crazy, right? Well, I have got an idea for you. And what I want you to think about is, how do you change the order of your slides to not only tell a great story, but to compel the audience or the listener or your participants or your buyers to act? Well, this might sound crazy, but one great way to do it is using the choreography that's used by reality makeover TV shows. I know that sounds crazy, but at the beginnings of these reality makeover TV shows, the individuals that they are there to help are volunteering to be on because they recognize that they have some kind of an issue, which is exactly what you experience, right? You're not barging into people's conference rooms or in this era Zoom bombing people and presenting to them. What you're doing is they're volunteering to have you come talk to them, right? They realize that there's an opportunity to do better. And so they're talking to you. Well, if you think about these shows, it's the exact same thing. And these guys, this is the Fab Five from Queer Eye on Netflix, but Restaurant Impossible does the same thing. The Biggest Loser, Extreme Makeover Home Edition. None of those shows start with the Fab Five here talking about how great they are and how many people they've helped and what their credentials are. That would be the boringest show in the history of the world. It starts with the participant. They always start with the individual's current state, talking about, hey, why are we here? What problems are you having? Why did you volunteer to be here? And then they quickly teach the individual that even the things that they just talked about, their situation might be a little worse than they thought. Here's a couple of things that maybe you didn't see. And then they lead to the solution, which is what these 5 guys on the Fab Five are doing, or whatever you're doing. What I would implore you to do is start thinking like a reality makeover TV show host or a hero. And when you go into your presentations, just reorder the slides. Instead of starting with you and how great you are, start with them in their current situation, and then show them how they can actually do better, teach them, and lead to your solutions instead of starting with them. The NASCAR slide goes in the back. When you tell the stories of how you will address how their current status quo is no longer sustainable, you can inject stories into there from customers, but move those types of logical slides to the back. What you'll find is it not only tells a great story, but it compels the audience or the listener or your buyers to action. Again, logic is polarizing, emotion and stories, they bring people together, and that's exactly what you want. And every one of those reality makeover TV shows, the show ends with everybody hugging and celebrating their successes, which is exactly what you want to have happen. So that's number 2. We make feeling decisions and use logic to back it up. So we need to create feelings and emotions in all of our outreach. All right, now we're on to number 3, and the one that is near and dear to my heart, given that I quit my job and wrote a book called The Transparency Sale, is that transparency sells better than perfection. And so let me tell you the story of what happened, and I think you'll come with me in understanding what this really means. But in my last role, I was the chief revenue officer of a company here in town called Power Reviews. Power Reviews helps retailers and brands collect and display ratings and reviews on their website. Well, we had partnered with Northwestern University a few years ago to look at consumer behavior on websites, like what they do and what tools they use when a website is acting as the salesperson, which is an e-commerce site. What we found, number one, no surprise, we all look at reviews today, right? 96% of us will look at a review before we buy something of medium to high consideration that we haven't bought before. Here's the kicker though. The second thing was that, as it turns out, 82% of us look for the negative reviews first. So we go right to the negatives, we skip the fives and go right to the ones, twos, threes, and fours. And when a review score has an average between 4.2 and 4.5, this is across all categories, some skew higher, some skew lower, but a 4.2 sells better than a perfect 5. That range, 4.2 to 4.5, is optimal for purchase likelihood. What does that mean? Well, we're wired to go to the negatives first when a website is acting as the salesperson, and imperfect sells better than perfect. Does that actually apply to human selling? Well, in doing the research and digging into the details, turns out that absolutely it does. As it turns out, we as human beings are just wired that way. We are wired to try to predict what our experience is going to be like with a product or service. And here's the problem. In most cases, salespeople, we hide the imperfections, we hide the flaws, we hide the things that we hope that the customer is not going to find out. And what we're doing is we're actually driving the buyers to do more homework. And especially in this day and age, when, again, like we talked about number one, that we're biased towards the easier path, not necessarily the biggest reward. Well, we have got to create easier paths. And as it turns out, if you, as a sales professional, as a leader, as a department head, whatever it is that you do, when we lead with, hey, here's the potential downside, but we're giving that up to be great at our core, you actually engage the buying brain more aggressively, you build trust, you disarm the filter and that feeling center that we talked about number two. And what you do say that's the positives will land when we lead with flaws. You know, one great example that I think about in the B2C space is our favorite retailer in the world, of course, IKEA. You know, IKEA, the experience is a nightmare. As you know, you go in, it's very hard to find anything. Once you find what you're looking for, there's no salesperson around to help you out. So you have to write down the code or take a picture of your phone, because you're going down into the warehouse to pick it off of shelves and probably weighs a ton, put it onto a cart that miraculously doesn't have brakes, which seems like a huge oversight, jam it into your car in the parking lot, Tetris style, drive home with an injury or two, and then you hope that you left all the fun at the store. You open the box and what do you find? 150 parts and not one single word on the work instructions. It's like a kid put together the work instructions. You F-bomb your way through it. Once you're done, you look at it, you get a little endorphin rush and you think, gosh, we should have bought the end tables with this bedroom set, and you go back. It's crazy. IKEA, for the 9th year in a row, is the #1 furniture retailer in the world. And all of those things that we talked about are true, right? Why is that? Because IKEA has embraced the things that they're giving up to be great at their core. They tell the world, listen, you're gonna have to find it, pick it, pack it, put it onto a cart, jam it into your car, and assemble it yourself with really no help. And the reason that we do that, we give those things up so we can give you modern Scandinavian design furniture that you didn't pay a lot for. Now, I encourage you to think in your business, what are the things that we're giving up to be great at our core? As a CRO, when we started leading with, hey, our competitors actually have these add-ons and we don't do those aren't on our roadmap because we're gonna be great at this. What happened is we disarmed that buying influence brain and our sales cycles sped up, our win rates went up, we worked on deals that we should win, we lost deals faster that we're going to lose anyway. It's better to lose fast than to lose slow. And we made it very hard on our competition. So what I would encourage you to do is take a look at this data point. This is from the Corporate Executive Board, or they're now Gartner, they were acquired. But back in 2017, CEB Gartner did a study that looked at buyer behavior. And what do buyers do when they are researching and trying to make a decision? Well, as it turns out, if you add those first two, they're actually only spending 39% of their time during the buying journey talking to you, talking to your competitors, and talking to their internal buying groups. They are actually spending 61% of their time doing other stuff. And what's that other stuff? Well, turns out that other stuff is the stuff they're not getting from you. When we're not presenting all of the information that the buyer needs to make a confident decision, and we're not building trust, the buyers are driven to check with analysts and look at research reports and back channel you to their friends. And if you're in the tech space, I hope you know what your G2.com score is or your trust radius score. And even Glassdoor, which is a place where current and former employees rate and review what the culture is like, what the experience is like. Buyers are looking at that too, because they're not just buying your products, they're buying you, they're buying your people. So I would implore you to look at that, act like a buyer and do the research that the buyer would do. Because as it turns out, transparency sells better than perfection. The brain science tells us that. But as it turns out, because of the proliferation of reviews and feedback on everything we do, everything we buy, and everything we experience, we got to do it anyway, because the customers will find out. So embrace that, do your homework, and lead with it. And I'll leave you with this word of wisdom from supermodel Tyra Banks, of all things. Tyra Banks coined the term flawsome. And what flawsome means is to embrace your flaws, but know that you're still awesome. I'm not asking you to go do that research, find out how terrible you are, and then start presenting that, hey, we suck. No, flawsome. Know that you've got flaws, embrace them, but lead with them, because it sells better than perfection. Think about that 4.2 to 4.5 range. You're still great, you're still awesome, but you are flawed. All right, so we've gone through a lot, but right now, more than ever, let's think back to this world of uncertainty that we are in. And we've got to optimize for the buying brain and understand what's going on in the human brain when making decisions. And remember that decisions are subconsciously biased by the cost and effort to act. That is so important right now, that when things are hard, buying is even harder because we're all remote, and getting consensus is a lot harder. So embrace that. Figure out how to clear your buying journey and make it as easy as possible. Number two, stop leading with ROI and logic and tell a story. Reorder your slides that not only tell a great story, but compel your listeners to act. And lastly, remember that transparency sells better than perfection. Lead with your flaws. It's not only disarming for the brain's resistance to being influenced, but because of the proliferation of reviews and feedback, we've got to do it anyway. Think like IKEA. IKEA has successfully won the hearts and minds of so many customers because they don't hide the fact that they're giving up certain things to be great at their core. Understand what that is in your business, lead with it, and I swear you're going to see some incredible results. So with that, thank you so much. I appreciate ITA for letting me be a part of this. Please, you can find me on LinkedIn. If you've got questions, connect with me there. I'm also on Twitter, pretty active there. You can find me on my website, transparencysale.com. And of course, the book, The Transparency Sale, is available anywhere books are sold. And I actually did the audiobook myself. So if you need the sultry sounds of Todd Caponi to lull you to sleep at night, buy the audiobook too. And again, thank you so much. I truly hope this was helpful.